want to talk about? What do you want to talk about?
So what we were planning on talking about today, even though we weren't planning on talking about anything, but I'm just making this up as I go. So here we go. Planning on talking about the football, maybe. How about a little bit of football going on there?
Yeah, let's talk about football.
No, let's talk about that.
Why don't we talk about that? Okay. And here's the intro of the song.
This is still part of the intro. Don't worry about us.
Yeah. You won't see any of this. This is the intro. We're still waiting for the intro. It takes about like 40 seconds.
We have really slow loading times for the intros. I don't know why.
Not to mention the random YouTube commercial that comes in every now and then.
Yeah, it's probably gonna come in right now.
Don't thank me. Thank the savings.
Oh yeah.
Just totally
just 2 minutes. 2 minutes of just waiting.
Interrupted. It's so rude. It's so rude. What do you think it's rude?
Savings.
My favorite football team's Florida State, and I don't really like a lot of NFL. So I watch a lot of college football. And I always have since I was little.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I do too. Our number one team, your number one team should be Western Michigan because we both went there for college at one point.
Well, of course.
We were all over the marching band, and I was a trombone player. You were the tenor sax player, so we can say that we're fans of the football team and like half the fans of the band, and that's like 60% of the reason I go to games now, actually, is because I want to hear the band.
Yeah.
So
the thing is, though, is like as much as I love Western, and there's nothing against Western, I am super happy when they win. I get more excited watching them win than even to watch Florida State. But my heart and love, mainly because I was conceived because of Florida State. My parents met at Florida State. That's where I watch, and that's why I watch so much of them. And I love college football. I love every single year. It's like fall is the favorite time of the year, and I'm not like the typical Michigander that goes, "Oh, I just love fall with all the foliage dropping down, with all the leaves, blah blah blah." I mean, it's pretty. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's mainly football that I'd miss.
That's a huge part of why I like football.
Yeah.
Or I like fall. It's football.
I love football because of football, man.
I like the football and the players running around the field, man. They're just going crazy.
No, but seriously though,
I was being serious.
No, you weren't. No one's ever. Moving on.
How do you know?
We'll talk about this later. Anyways, college football is great, and I love everything about it. But I think what Greg was wanting to talk about, mainly because he was hinting at this earlier this evening, was the idea of how college football's kind of become, I don't want to say crappy, but it's kind of become not fun as much to watch anymore.
Well, I still think it's a lot of fun to watch. But for me, a lot of the drawbacks for it now mainly are just discrepancies in the background, more or less.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that the ranking system has changed so much over the past 10 years that, I give them credit for trying different things, but for some reason they think they have to get rid of one idea completely to get to another one, instead of just combining the best of two worlds, or 3 or 4. And I don't know why they have to be like, well, we're in the BCS, so now we have to switch over to this one because BCS is no good. Nobody wants it. There's no good qualities about that BCS, man.
Yeah, and that drives me insane. So, like, for people who are not sports fans, because I know this channel is not about sports, it's not about all this stuff. The BCS system was basically a computer-generated system that would tally up people's wins based upon ranking, based upon the competitors and the people that they face, who they're facing throughout the season, what is the likelihood of them getting to the national championship game. And then what the BCS would do is they would pair up number 1 and number 2 for the season. Those two teams would face each other for national championship, and one of those teams would come out to be the national championship of the year. And that system, for the most part, worked, but the problem with that system was it was very computer generated. It was very symptomatic to just looking at the numbers and only the numbers, and not necessarily looking at the results of the game and how the game progressed and played, which is, I think, kind of an important tally and understanding of how games go. So like if a team won a game and it was against a tough opponent, they would jump enormously up the rankings to get to where they're at. And it would make the other team drop a little bit. And it seemed unfair. There was like a lot of dropping and a lot of gaining rankings and dropping rankings. And it was just inconclusive. And the reason why it's inconclusive, the biggest reason is because there's 130 plus teams in the NCAA football Division One,
just Division One.
Yeah, just Division One. That it's really hard to systematically find every single team, look at their rankings, look at where they're positioned. It really doesn't work out. Like, for example, there could be undefeated teams in conferences that are not quote-unquote tough. Like, for example, Western Michigan's part of the Mid-American Conference. Their likelihood of getting a national championship game, even if they go undefeated, is very slim because they don't face anybody too terribly tough throughout the season compared to other big programs and conferences that have a lot of names.
Yeah,
the BCS the BCS made it kind of impossible for them to ever have a chance because of the system it was in, and they were noticing that.
And whether or not that's actually on purpose is digging a little into conspiracy theory mumbo jumbo there.
I don't think it was on purpose. I just think that.
But I mean, it's just become set up that way so that it's very unfair to. I mean, I don't even want to call them smaller schools because I mean they're smaller in size. I don't think they should be smaller in competitiveness.
No.
And the only reason that they're considered that is because of recruiting and facilities, which is what it all comes down to. And that's just been built up over the years and over time. And there's no way that the league could have prepared for this outcome. So now they're just forced to embrace it because they're the most popular schools like U of M, Notre Dame, and now Alabama and Clemson this season and the past couple of seasons have really been dominating. So it's kind of like you're either in the clubhouse and you're going to get there, you're going to be competing in the top 10 every year, or you're an outsider looking in, and if you do amazingly well, you might get in. And even if you do get in, you're probably not going to face the top 3 or 4 opponents.
Right.
And I don't know if that's necessarily fair, based on like popularity or based on popularity refers to the new system of the NCAA playoff, NCAA playoff.
Yeah. So now let's come into the past 3 years now. This is the third year of the playoffs.
I think this is the third year.
Yeah, it's the third year. So seeing the 3 years of playoffs now that we've seen, to me, in my humble opinion, this is just a mess. It's not necessarily a bad direction. It's definitely the right direction. But the first thing that they did in this change, this is exactly what Greg was talking about. When something doesn't work, they just throw out the whole system and call it bad. Mm-hmm. Here's where BCS, I think, was really, really well done, is the fact that it was done by a calculative-based system, meaning that it was still picking the best teams in the entire nation to go up against each other. The reason where the place where the BCS failed was when it came to the bowl season and it came to the national championship team, because there were teams that should have gone to the national championship and were arguably the best teams in the nation that you had to pick 1 and 2. And the BCS system is not designed for that. So it didn't work in that theory. But the problem is that it still was very calculative data that could be used to create a playoff system that would be amazing. Instead, we picked a playoff system with a committee of people that then choose who are the best teams in the nation. And these committee members are not all entirely bad. A lot of these committee members are previous coaches of programs, program directors of the conferences and how players goes. But you also have a lot of outliers in that too. You have like Condoleezza Rice was in it 1 year, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with her.
Basically, they're guest celebrity stars or something like that. And I don't know how you get chosen for something like that. Like, oh, you seem to be a really popular person who... expresses interest in this sport, maybe you should be invited to this big thing. And it's like, well, shouldn't this be more of an experts only area? Because each individual vote counts towards where people get placed, and it's really important.
Yeah, it's super important. And the other thing about this too is that the ranking system of it is also going back to the coaches polls before we had the BCS, where literally the coaches would come and be like, okay, this team's the best, this team's the best, this team's the best. But you had a lot of arbitrary, and this is the reason why the BCS was created in the first place. You had a lot of arbitrary picking of rankings that are like, well, you're picking these teams because they're in your conference. Of course, you're going to think they're the best. That's why the SEC,
Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, Southeastern Conference. That's right. The Southeastern Conference is, they're picked and favored as the best teams all the time because everyone likes those teams. Everyone knows those teams' names, and therefore they're always picked. How does that create fairness? How does that create a good amount of numbers and how the system works? And so not only that's in play, but the other thing too is that this BCS the BCS is gone. The playoffs are in, and by the way, the playoff system that we have is really, really silly. 4 teams out of 130 teams, 30 plus teams in the Division 2 or Division 1 go in to be the playoff system. That's 2 games. 3 games technically, but 2 games.
Yeah, 2 games decide who will be the national championships, pretty much.
That's just not enough. If you're going to do a playoff system, you need to have a little bit more than just four teams going in. I mean, that's the other thing too is that you have 4. Put it in the context of this too. You have 4 teams that get in. Most likely, that means that's only 4 teams from 4 different conferences going in, and that's not including 2 of the same conference good in there too, which I find completely unfair. But realistically, everyone goes through a conference championship game. They pick their conference champion, and then they have the most likely, based off how it works, the conference championship guy goes in. But there are so many conferences in the country. How many? I think there's 10 or 11?
10 to 12. I'm not sure exactly how many there are.
I don't know offhand of how many there are in Division 1, but I know that there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And so you're picking only 4 teams out of 11 conferences that can play in the national championship game. Where's the fairness in that? That's the thing. This entire system that we have now based on arbitrary likelihood of the top teams going in, the Power 5 conferences getting in there all times, not necessarily vouching for Western Michigan to get the national championship, but at the same time, I'm vouching for teams, even within the Power 5, at least send one representative of every single Power 5 conference into the national championship. I mean, that makes sense. Every single conference has their national or their conference champion. Why wouldn't they be able to go into and play for the national title game? That doesn't make a lot of sense, and there's a lot.
Yeah, so you should have one. I mean, there's an easy way to rule out a week of games too, because from what I've heard, the main reason they don't want to expand to so many teams in the playoff is because they're you can only play 1 game a week, which makes sense because football is really intense on your body and stuff like that. So you got to give the students time to recover. They're in classes. Even though, I mean, if it was that long, then the playoffs would be encompassing, exam periods, the end of the semesters and stuff like that. So they got to give the students a break and be able to go back to school, get their homework, all this stuff. So there's a lot of non-football factors that go into thinking about the football schedule. And even expanding to, let's say, 8 teams. Twice as many as there are now. I feel like that is the sweet spot for the college football playoff, because what you can do is that there are 12 conferences who have 12 conference champions. What you can do is that and I don't know if this would be fair or not, but from the 2 weakest conferences, or I guess or maybe it would be 4, because you know how the Major League Baseball does the wild card games?
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess the other major sports do too. So you could have like a couple of wild card games, and I'm not entirely sure what the rules would be to choose who goes to those games over just being automatically
This
put
is
into it.
spitballing, I think, what Greg's
Oh
trying
yeah,
to do.
this is just a spitballing idea I've been thinking about for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And they get chosen and they go off again. They go and face off against each other, and then if they get into the college playoff, they get in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then from there, it kind of works itself out a lot more than just instead of having having two games to decide who's in the national championship. You have, let's see, 4, 6, about 8 games because you got 2 wild card games. You have 4 for the first round of the college football playoff, and you have 2.
The other argument that comes to this all the time, people always say around, is talking about bowl games. And as much as I love bowl games, and I think they're super important, and they make a lot of money and revenue for universities. I mean, Western Michigan got to a BCS bowl this year, which was amazing for us because that's a huge
incredible.
That's the thing. And if you look at the stadium, if you go to Western Michigan University and you see what the improvements of their facilities do and stuff like that, it's amazing for the university. So of course the university is very interested in getting into those things, and they're very interested in those bowl games. I'm not trying to take away from the bowl games either, but at the same time, if you look at your perspective, like honestly, my humble opinion, I want 16-man bracket for playoffs, and I have a way of considering doing this. First of all, in an average season, 12 games is the average season, but if you really look at it, most of the time teams play 9 games conference, and then they play 3 games non-conference. I'm actually at the point where I'm kind of wanting to say that those 3 games non-conference are not necessarily as important. So I would say take 2 of them away. Then you have a 10-game season, which used to be the norm a long time ago before all of these wins and stuff like that. 10 games were the actual things because everyone didn't want to go into... They didn't, like, again, with all the issues with with students, not having enough time for schooling and education, they didn't want to have more than, 10 games a season. And then you'd have a bowl game, and then that'd be it. That would be your big hurrah. But with the conference game, you would have that extracurricular thing. But the point is, what I'm trying to say is that you would have a 16-man bracket. You would use that 16-man bracket. Okay, sorry. Back up.
Yeah.
So you have 9. So let's go back to the regular season. Regular season, you have 9 games. Maybe even if you wanted to, make it a rule for all conferences to put that back down to 8 games. Because you don't need to face 9 of your conference opponents. Because most of the time, conferences are split up on one division and the other division. And then you would take on a couple of teams in one division. And then you take on your entire team of all the teams in your personal division.
Yeah, and the way it usually works out for math is that there's like 6 per conference, 6 per division in the conference.
Yeah, so you take on 5 games, and then you would have 3 or 4 extracurricular conference games. That would be basically arbitrary. But if you really wanted to play an 8-man conference, you would have all of your opponents in one division. You would take on the other opponents. Maybe there's like interdivisional rivalry that you would have every year. And then you would have that one extracurricular game where you have that team that you would take on non-conference. So for example, I'm a Florida State fan. That would be Florida for us. We would take on Florida. And you take on our rivalry. That's a huge rivalry. That's a big money, coming in like to the college. Everyone comes to that game. It's the most important game out of the year.
Yep.
You would take on that team, and then you would have that rivalry there. Then, but then the rest of your season would be either the 8-man conference, or you can have even a second non-conference game where it could be your mamby-pamby, beat up team that you would always have for either homecoming or the first, your opening.
That'd be from Division 2 instead of Division 1.
Yeah, Division 2 or even Division 1 teams. You would take on whoever you wish to take on. But the thing about that is that with the conferences and the way things are, there are some programs, even in college right now, that are taking on 2 or 3 teams that have no business taking on. Like you have, Tennessee comes in and takes out Harvard. because like Harvard's a Division III Ivy League school that does nothing with football, and you just see them get pummeled to the ground 76-2, and you just have and that's like all of the things you find. And it's a pointless game, but you don't need as many of those. And I think, with the system that you have in place, a 10-game season and then a 16-man bracket plus a conference championship game, that's 11 games. Then if you were going up in a 16-man bracket, if you are starting at the 16-man bracket, you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4 games. So that's 15 games, which is the season we have now. That's exactly. Yeah, it's only 15. If you get to the national playoffs, you would go to 16 games or 15 games. Then that's exactly what we'd have now. And so no time would be any different if you set up a system like that. And honestly, in my opinion, it would create a fairness for other teams to get in. Teams that are outside the BCS, the Power 5.
Would it be 15? Because 12 and
that's why I said 15.
Oh, I thought you said 16.
16-man bracket, 15 games all around.
Okay,
there you go.
Sorry, I'm interrupting your train of thought. Don't lose it.
So you have that in there, and so you'd have conference. Conference determines who's going to be in 16-man bracket, most likely based upon the rankings between rank 1 to number 16, and then that'd be your 16-man bracket. And you set it up just like you watch March Madness, you watch any other program, and then you go into the system. Now, I would also put another contingency in there too, saying we should bring back the BCS and no longer this, committee of chair groups picking teams that are going in, because the reason for it is that it creates arbitrary rules. I mean, unless the committee is completely set on ground rules that everyone can read, but then at the point, what's the point of having committee choose if there's like a bunch of these rules coming in saying this is how you have to pick?
Well, what I think is that instead of any committee to balance out the BCS, you just pick analysts who constantly study the game, watch every freaking football game in the season.
Well, a committee of them, yeah.
And if you have a small group of them, I guess it would be a committee still, even though it's a small group.
But you don't even need to watch games. You just need to pay attention to analysis.
Yeah, they pay attention to.
I hope they're not picking. I hope they're not picking based off of the fact that this kid made a one-handed catch and that was amazing, even though their team lost. I hope that's not what's happening.
Well, no, I meant they look at they're more of the macro, not the micro. they're looking at Western Michigan University, not Corey Davis.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though everybody looked at Corey Davis last year, let's face it, people.
Yeah, right.
I miss that man.
But anyways, the point is what I'm trying to say is that they need to find a better system of picking rankings and how rankings go. Mm-hmm. Someone coming at the door?
No, nobody's coming. Okay. I hear noises and I'm like,
but they need to pick. They need to pick a person, or not even a person, just a system that is not susceptible to altering or changing. And that's what the BCS was to me. I liked the BCS. There wasn't anything wrong with it. There are a lot of people in this country, too, are also siding with that idea, too. Like, hey, what was so bad with the BCS? All we wanted was a playoff system. That's all we wanted. Why did we have to get rid of the one thing we liked? And it's just...
Yeah, I mean, we didn't like the BCS because you couldn't get a good postseason out of it for the people who are in contention to go to the championship.
Exactly. I mean, and that was also during the time, too, where you would have 3 teams that are undefeated. There was a time where that was a problem, or
that was the thing. It was the thing.
There was we had 3 teams that would go undefeated every season, and I understand kind of the rule how they're breaking that. They're taking on these teams that normally win. For this year it was Alabama versus Florida State. They're trying to get that out of the way so we don't have the comparison of the teams that would possibly make it to the
and they actually want people to be interested in week 1 of college football now too. There's
exactly
a huge push for that, which I don't blame them for, but.
No, but exactly. But that creates
it interesting.
But at the same argument, though, too, is that it also would be a lot more interesting if over, 60% of the teams in this program would have a chance for a national championship game. That's the biggest problem, too, is that even with these non-Power 5, conference teams that coming into play, they never have a chance. They never have a chance to make it. And even people in remember when Western Michigan showed up to Were you with? I don't remember if I was hanging out with you or not, but we were watching it on TV when game day showed up to Western Michigan, and like
We were all there.
They were talking about Western Michigan, and it was like this team that never will foresee ever seeing a national championship game, and they're kind of all right with that. Like what? We're not okay with that.
No.
That's not something that we're good with.
I was
Or
gonna say, I'm pretty sure it's the first time we've ever heard that said before. Like,
Yeah,
especially
ever.
from like an announcer.
yeah, just
on
basically
national
being like,
TV.
just
You're
being
just
like these teams, these
what?
teams that never have a chance making it to national championship. First of all, Western Michigan, even though they lost to Wisconsin, who was ranked 8th in their bowl game, they lost to a very close game. It was 8-point difference.
It was only because of one player too.
Exactly. Well,
Just
yeah, that guy was a
destroyed us.
beast. But anyways, the point is what I'm trying to say. It was still an 8-point game, so it wasn't like a blowout or anything like that. And they have a chance. They could have had a chance to even go further. They could have beaten Wisconsin. It didn't happen, but they could have.
Yeah, it was.
So the argument.
I was proud of that.
Yeah. So the argument of their saying that they would never have a chance is ludicrous. That's unfair. That means that the system is flawed and everyone knows it. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. That's not why it's like. So it's really hard for me to get into the passion of loving watching sports, especially if your team that you know is going to make it. Like, for example, Florida State's 1-3 this year, the first time since 1976 that's ever happened to our team.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going anywhere this season. There's nothing fantastic happening for us. Maybe a bowl game, hopefully a bowl game, because we still have a record to keep up with. But if not, then, I mean, what's the point? What's the point of me getting excited to watching a national championship game? What's the point of me wanting to see these teams make it all the way? And what's so fun watching Alabama make it to a playoff season every single year like they're going to do now? And especially now Clemson being all of a sudden this hot dog team that they were for the past, 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, it's just Clemson, Alabama. I guarantee you, if I see another game, another playoff season where it's Clemson versus Alabama again, I'm going to lose my mind. It's why?
Yeah, it's too repetitive right now.
And
I mean, they both teams lose people every year, just like every other team does, and that's the reason that people usually don't follow up on a national championship unless they're like, we lost like 2 people last season, we still have all of our stars, let's go again.
I'll be right back.
So hi everybody. Thing that we were talking about earlier, which was all of the teams. Leon, come back. So the college football playoff, really, I don't agree with the way it's being portrayed right now. I think that it needs at least another round to decide it's a larger selection of teams that have definitely earned their spot to compete for a national championship, but they're just not given the chance. It's this very weird system of, okay, well, all of you guys have earned this chance, but we think that these 4 have earned more of a chance. They all should have a chance of getting to the national championship. And whether or not they're better than the teams that get picked for the college football playoff right now, I don't know. We don't know. We won't know until they actually expand the college playoff. When big teams, historically big teams that are like, oh, number 1 Alabama versus number 3 Florida State. Here we go, big matchup, first week of the season. These teams are not developed at all. They don't even have an identity yet. So what my issue is with actually having them face each other right away is that they're not the same teams then that they would have been at the end of the season when they actually would have faced each other in past seasons. And I don't really like that fact because you just gave a loss to somebody who might not have had a loss in the first place. Have another crazy winning season and be in another college football playoff, like Leon said. Football, Clemson versus Alabama, here we go. Woo, let's root for the same teams every year. I'm seeing red and orange in my dreams. But anyways, I just really hope that we can figure out a different system and that we just don't stick with this for the next 10 years. I mean, people complained about the BCS for I don't know how long before they were like, okay, here's your college playoff. And because you complain so much, we're going to take the BCS away. You're happy now, right? Okay, yeah. And then people realize, no, we're not happy about this very strange selection committee that has biases towards the schools they went to, towards the schools they taught at, towards the schools they coached at. And I mean, yeah, you're going to have a little bit of bias on a human committee. It's just going to happen. But you got to have a system already set up that's like systematically pointing out the teams like, this is number 1, they're number 2, they're number 3, they're number 4, just like the BCS did. And I really hope that we can go back to a system that involves both of them at some point. So I had a nice chat with our audience while you were gone.
Our wonderful audience.
Our wonderful studio audience, because this is studio.
Everyone applause. See, they applauded over there. Ted put in some applause. Anyway.
What are you talking about? I heard applause.
I mean, I heard it too. Ted, don't forget to put the applause in. Where were we? So we were talking about football.
Well, I just talked about quite a few different things. I went back and explained like how I didn't think that having big teams face off against each other at the beginning of the season is a good idea because neither of those teams that are facing each other are even developed yet. They don't have an identity.
Yeah, that's actually a good point.
Which
you're ruining your potential. Yeah, you're ruining the potential.
The potential for both of them to be like a possibility for the college football playoff is it could accidentally go to another team because you gave them a loss.
And see, that's exactly why I was talking about doing the conference, having a non-conference game at the beginning of the year, having a non-conference game somewhere in the mid or even at the last game of the year like Florida State, Florida does. Mm-hmm. You know, that creates a good solidification because the first game of the season, go up against your Division II if you really want to. I don't think you should do Division II because, I mean, honestly, let's think about it. The NFL doesn't go up against, division conference team from random college thing like that. Why would Division I do the same thing?
I just thought, does the NFL have a minor league?
Yeah, they do.
I know they do. I thought they did because
they have, but they also have like arena football. I mean, there is a type of minor league. It's not really it's not like the MLB.
There's a Canadian league. I don't know if I'd necessarily put them like underneath the NFL.
Well, yeah, there's like minor league teams and stuff like that. What's a good example? The Ranch Colt character, Ashton Kutcher's character. He was playing on a minor league team. There is such things. There is such things. They're not popular by any means. No one knows anything about them, but they exist. But like you wouldn't see a minor league team go up against the NFL as your tune-up game or something like that. Why does college do the same thing? And I know it helps those Division II teams become more noticeable. I mean, look at Appalachian State. They weren't anything until they beat Michigan, and then they became a Division I team.
Yes, please remind this Michigan fan of that day. Wonderful memories that I see every single year. ESPN always has to bring that up.
Today, let's talk about Lloyd Carr.
He's a great man, a great coach.
He was a great he was a great coach, but I honestly feel like the Appalachian season kind of made him lose his job. In a lot of ways.
I think he wanted to retire. He was old.
I think he did too, but I mean, I think he wanted to retire on a better note than our team just lost to Appalachian State.
Well,
with a blocked kicked field goal, almost returned all the way back.
That's true. Yeah.
I shouldn't really be talking shit right now. Florida State's 1-3.
Yeah, 1-3.
They suck this year.
You're 1-3. Have fun with that season.
Yeah.
Michigan just lost to Michigan State too, so
I know it's a little.
I was. So, from historical standards, Michigan State always likes to beat us in the rivalry when we're ranked, and they're not supposed to beat us.
Oh, yeah.
I guess that makes a good rivalry when you beat each other when you're at your best.
Yeah, duh. That's why Florida State's also amazing, too. And why also Florida State-Miami game this year was the way it was, man. Which was weird, because even everyone was giving the turn to Florida State beating Miami when Florida State had no ranking at all. And I was like, that's weird.
It's like it carried over from the first game that was supposed to happen that was canceled because of the hurricane.
Yeah, I think that did too.
Because they were ranked higher than them in that game before they lost 2 games.
Mm-hmm. Now we're just rambling on about our favorite teams, but
this is going to happen eventually.
Oh, I know.
I mean, this is why we shouldn't sit on the selection committee either. The same people.
See, that's exactly my same argument for our selection committee. We're favorited. I want Florida State to make it every year, and if they have a contingency to make it,
Florida State.
Like if they're 11-1 at the end of the season, winning their conference, they'd be like, yeah, they should definitely make it. But maybe they shouldn't, especially with the system that they have in now. The point is the BCS worked, and that's where I'm at. It just didn't work when you had programs and teams who would be undefeated all the way to the end of the season.
Exactly.
That's where it didn't work, because there was 5 or 6 teams that deserved the position of going, and they couldn't fill it. They had to fit 2 slots, and that was impossible to choose. So they had to go like, well, which team played better? What does that mean? They played and never lost. That's the argument.
Yeah.
A team that should play and never lose should always be able to go into the national championship. It just should happen.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because of the way football works, and you can only play it once a week, you can't have a March Madness.
No, you can't.
Kind of set up like college basketball does.
No, you can't. You can't have a 64-man bracket, but a 16-man bracket is possible. I just talked about it. It is a thing. That is still going to be the same amount of games. You could still put every single week could be another bowl game, because there's so many freaking bowl games. Every single week will be a bowl game. And so that could lead to contention of teams winning more than one bowl game a season. Wouldn't that be amazing? That'd be cool. It'd be a lot of fun to watch.
It's been really interesting to see, like, the higher up bowl games actually mean something. It's like, oh, whoever wins this game is going to go on to the national championship game.
Yeah.
Which, that's one aspect I like of it, the Rose Bowl not being the championship game every year, even though historically I miss, because the Rose Bowl is like the magical, like, oh, that's the promised land.
But that's actually,
there,
that's actually the other thing too, is that you had 4 BCS games. Why not have the same thing instead of having interchangeable BCS like bowl games that would switch out? Like, so the 2 that are going to the national championship or winning is going to be the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl this year.
Or the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl.
Or or not even Tostitos. It's now. I think it's
now.
It's still the Fiesta Bowl. I think it's the Doritos or the. Not Doritos. It's
the Locos Tacos. Or
no, it's
Fiery
not.
Rancheros.
No, it is the Taco Bell Fiesta Bowl, isn't it? Taco Bell owns it now. I don't remember. Whoever, maybe it's write in the comment. Whoever knows.
Maybe it's Del Taco. For all I know.
Yeah, but there is still a Fiesta Bowl. But they're like the saying is like you have. So like if you're doing the semifinals, those 4 games, you have the 16-man bracket. You have 16. You have 8 games. Then it goes to 4 games. So the first 16 games are like the wild card games, where you have maybe just some random bowl or make up a random bowl that gives you more potential to create another bowl game that you could win in that situation.
Yeah.
Then go into the normal BCS bowl games, then go into the semifinals, then go to the national championship.
Yeah, the number 1 team is going to probably pummel the number 16 team if they're deserving of that spot.
Exactly, but you never know, and that's what's so great about what's so great about playoffs. That's exactly the argument for why playoffs exist.
It's a real playoff.
Yeah, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if number 16 team in the conference, ranked 16 in the conference, actually had what it took to become national championship. Like, if you did the bowl based on a 16-man bracket from last year, Western Michigan should have been there, taking on Clemson.
There's another rank. I think there was another ranked
16, yeah.
non-power conference that was right behind
Colorado?
us, like
Colorado. No.
Colorado's in front of us, actually.
Yeah, Colorado's in front. Yeah, it was.
Or no, they were right behind.
But they're also Power 5. No, are they Power 5? They're not Power 5, are they?
I think they're Power 5, actually.
Oh, whatever.
I don't remember.
But anyways, but you had teams that would make it. So Western Michigan take on Clemson. If they lose, they lose. I mean, that's just the way it is. If it lost, it happens. But if Western Michigan made it and continued going, well, what's your argument? Where's the argument there? Maybe the Power 5 isn't. It's just a freaking illusion. I mean, for the most part, it's not, because we see every single year that these teams get beat up by the Power 5
and again,
all the time.
that's because they've had years and years to develop their facilities more than these other schools
exactly
have.
But at the same time, if this system was in place and everyone liked this system, you will eventually see that the Power 5 was no longer a conference situation. Everyone would start having better facilities. It would be a better diverse group of situation and how everything goes in.
And we have already seen that, actually.
We have,
but not in that way, technically.
Yeah.
It's because the way that the recruiting works now, and it's not even necessarily like the initial recruiting, because the initial recruiting is still always the same as it has been. The big schools are like, where's the number 1 defensive end going to go? Where's this number 5 amazing athletic guy going to go?
All these high schoolers.
Probably Alabama, Texas, or one of these crazy good schools that just our farm teams for forever.
Mm-hmm.
But then you start to realize, like, hey, where did this guy come from on this supposedly no-show team?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this guy is amazing. Like, Central Michigan forever ago had Lefevre, and he was an amazing quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
He made a huge splash in college football. He took them. I mean, they dominated the conference. They won the championship. They went to the bowl. I think they won that championship, anyways.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, they won.
They went to the
MAC.
championship bowl that MAC schools usually go to.
Yeah, they went to the.
I forget.
They went to Ford Field. That's all I know. The Little Caesars Bowl.
No, they didn't. That was before Little Caesars Bowl.
Oh, that's right. No, it was like the motor. Not the.
It was like a mobile
marathon.
It was like
marathon.
Mobile, Alabama, or something like that.
Yeah, it was like it was like a marathon bowl or something.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
yeah, it was.
Or it was owned by Marathon. I don't know what the bowl name is. But yeah,
I don't know if the bowl is actually the same every year either, because a lot of the bowls have like
they're owned by
credentials.
companies. Yeah,
they have credentials for who actually goes there.
Yeah,
and they give out bids.
And companies own those. Yeah, companies own those bowls and buy rights to those bowls so they can have those two teams perform, and they give up a lot of money for that stuff, and it's really awesome. It's a good system. I actually have no problem with that system at all, and I don't want to see the bowl games go away necessarily. I just want to see I just want there to be a reason for teams to go into fighting saying, hey, this is my chance. I want to see a third lost team have a potential to go to national championship. I just want to see that, because losing 3 games means you only technically lost a third of your season. No, a fourth of your season. You only lost a fourth of your season. That's not terrible. That's not a reason.
It's not awful. I mean,
Yeah.
so you'd have a 6-3 record.
Well, I mean,
system.
It would be
because you said it's
it'd
not,
be 7-3 if we're gonna go with the 10-game season.
Okay, it'd be a 10-game season.
But if I'm talking about like even 12-game season, that's still only a fourth,
Yeah.
And so I mean that's just crazy to think that like a team that lost twice in a season, they have no chance to going into anything better than just maybe lucking into a really nice bowl. Like, that's it. And it's like, you should have an incentive to see that these teams can make it. And it's still really hard to do. It's not like we're going to take something away. 16 teams, that means the top 16 teams in a 130-plus league is ridiculously hard. That's still really hard, but at least it's still going to be entertaining to watch and watch all of these teams make it as far as they can. And if my team didn't make it, oh well. It's still more entertaining to watch that than just watching the same 4 frickin' teams every year, minus the random with Washington from last year, and maybe this year the way that Washington State's playing, maybe they're going to be the new outlier. I don't even know, but it's just like
No idea.
But it's just like
But
it's boring. It's boring. Like, that's what I want to say.
It gets really boring when you get to playoff season. Because it's just like, oh, look, Alabama's there again.
Oh, look, Clemson's there again. Yeah. Ever since the conception of the bowl seasons, Clemson has always been there. Alabama has always been there. They're probably going to be there this year. I have no doubt in my mind that Clemson and Alabama have the likelihood of making it all the way through, because there really isn't going to be a lot of upsets or changes going on the way that they're playing right at this moment. Now, that could change because college football is amazing, and you see a lot of amazing upsets.
Mm-hmm.
However, for right now, it doesn't look good, and if it looks the way it's looking right now, I don't know, man. It's not fun to watch. It's not fun to be part of. I can't stand it anymore. Like, it's not what I wanted. It's not what I signed up for when it came to like being a super fan of college football. So please, anyone who's listening to this is my rant about
Well, obviously the NCAA is taking notes while we're
exactly.
About
they
this.
care about this deeply.
They care about our podcast, man. They're hearing our voices.
But realistically, dude, they do care about people talking and conversing about this stuff. If you feel the same way in the likelihood about this, just maybe express
like,
this.
Comment, subscribe.
Not doing that. If you feel the same way, maybe express your own opinion. Talk about this in another likelihood. And maybe, I'm not saying boycott college football because I don't want to
No,
see
don't
that
do
either.
that. That's a bad idea.
But show the interest and say, look, we're not happy with this. What's going on? Maybe boycott the national championship game. That's actually not a bad idea because you're not going to.
I mean, their ratings have already gone down a bunch in the past. Like,
Exactly.
couple years.
It could be a lot better if you bring in teams that would be like this. And I know this is also be like, well, if your team never makes it, you're never going to want to watch the national championship game anyways. I'm like, that's not true though, because when I was younger, I used to die for the national championship game. I used to love it, no matter who was going up there.
It was a big deal, man.
It
a lot of
it
fun.
was so much fun to watch, and it was so worth seeing the teams. It was so much fun watching every single bowl game year after year after year. But it's not like that anymore. I had no desires for it. It's just, I don't know. It's not fun watching the same teams over and over again. I know I'm beating a dead horse at that, but it's just not. It's just not fun watching Alabama conquer the world with their teams. And it's not to say that it's Alabama's fault. Alabama's doing everything right in terms of winning and winning and winning.
Well, yeah,
they're
breaking the system is what's happening.
Yeah.
And somehow Nick Saban's been doing it without getting any allegations of doing shady things either, which they're the only team who's been remained unscathed throughout this past 10 years.
I mean, that is kind of true. And I'm not saying that Nick Saban's doing anything wrong.
No, I'm not saying either.
He is in a lucky situation to basically be abusing the system as it's done, basically saying, I take on these teams. I know I'm safe taking on these teams. The fact that he chose to take on Florida State this year was super surprising. And unfortunately, Florida State did nothing in that game. But at the same time, they also...
your team's in a rebuilding phase.
Well, not only that, but we also got our quarterback injured in that game. It was just nothing. There was a lot of downside in that match, and that's part of this.
You're down to your third string pretty much, aren't you?
No, I'm still second string. We got... I think,
I think they were starting still, third string.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I think Blackman's still playing. But that's the thing. He got injured in another game too. Blackman got injured for a little while. That's why our third string was in. But for a little while. So I mean, it's just trying to put the big wow games in the front. It's not helping. It's not fixing the problem. It's just putting a giant Band-Aid over the major issue of saying, hey, look, these teams are facing who they are. And if Florida State kept on winning after the Alabama game, this may have been a different story, but it also would have proved our point even more, saying, okay, so Florida State loses to Alabama and they still make it into the playoffs, coming in that kind of topic and everything like that. If they won every single game, won their conference and made it up to there, there's no doubt you would not say, okay, Florida State deserves to be up there in that win. I mean, even if there were teams, even if there were 4 undefeated teams at the end of the season, they would still be like, well, but Florida State's only loss was against Alabama, so therefore they have to make it. Kind of like the same thing Ohio State did last year with their Penn State won the national or the conference, so therefore they don't go. Okay. Whatever. I guess that's how that works. Well,
I'm also biased against Ohio State.
Oh, so. Well, of course you are. You're a Michigan fan. You're from Michigan. You don't like Ohio State.
You're from Michigan. Nobody likes the Ohio State.
Hey, Ted, just to give you more work, throw in some Eagles and make a giant red screen and go hug a cat. All right, cool.